Africa reminds us that power wears many masks. In Guinea-Bissau, generals ousted President Mbalo, suspended elections and installed a transitional leader while the streets stayed calm. Why? Because everyone knew it was happening. In South Africa, Trump tried to uninvite the nation from the G20 over ceremonial disputes, only to be reminded that forums don't answer to tantrums. And in Namibia, SWAPO reclaiming almost every council while most citizens stayed home, proving that absence can be as influential as participation. My name is Ashwin Berry. It's time for Second Take. In Guinea-Bissau, nobody waits for international confirmation to know when a coup has happened. The country has lived through so many that the population can identify one the way a seasoned fisherman can smell a storm long before the clouds gather. The soldiers march differently. The radio presenters pause differently. Even the goats in Bissau stop mid-chew. Everyone knows, everyone feels it. And this time was no different. The morning of November 26 didn't arrive with suspense. It arrived with recognition. Gunshots crackling around the palace. That's a coup. Soldiers taking over the state broadcaster. That's a coup. Borders closing before lunchtime. That's a coup. A general speaking on television about restoring order. That is not only a coup. It's an official announcement. The way some countries do press releases. Guinea-Bissau didn't bother pretending. The people didn't gasp. They didn't wonder. They didn't ask each other what was happening. They simply said, we have a new government. Because in this country, the signs are familiar, like chapters in a long-running series. The generals step forward, the politicians scatter like pigeons. ECOWAS releases a statement recycled from 7 previous crises, and the international media dithers with phrases like suspected coup, possible coup, attempted coup. But the people, they already moved on to the next episode. So when Brigadier General Dinis in Kana went on TV declaring total control, Guinea-Bissau didn't blink. They didn't need analysis. They didn't need think pieces. They didn't need to wait 24 hours like the BBC. They understood immediately. This wasn't a debate. This wasn't an attempt. It was a finished product. By the time Major General Hota Intam was sworn in the next day, the calm in the streets wasn't a surprise. It was routine. The markets opened, tea kettles bowled, taxis honked, children went to school and learned math under a new regime before their teachers even realized the president had been flown out of office. The nation adjusted as if switching channels. Even the joke started early. Some Bissau residents reportedly said at least this one didn't interrupt the afternoon football matches. Others debated whether this coup would last longer than the last one, the same way people in other countries compare movie sequels. Guinea-Bissau has made instability so predictable that citizens critique it like critics review cinema. Good pacing, strong execution, minimal casualties, a solid entry into the national catalogue. And yet, beneath the humor lies a wary intelligence. Guinea-Bissau understands its own politics the way a family understands its generational curse. Nobody in Bissau believes the story about narco traffickers plotting to destabilize the state. They've heard that one too many times. Nobody thinks the one-year transition will last exactly 1 year. And certainly nobody believes this was an accident, misunderstanding, or spontaneous misunderstanding of democratic timing. The country knew what was happening even before the journalists finished typing their first sentences. They knew when the election was suspended, when political rivals vanished from the streets, when uniforms outnumbered civilians in the capital. They knew it when Mbalo's convoy mysteriously detoured. A coup in Guinea-Bissau is not an event. It is a diagnosis. International analysts treat coups like mysteries to be solved. Guinea-Bissau treats them like weather reports. Predictable, seasonal, sometimes dramatic, but never confusing. So let the world argue about terminology. Let Reuters update headlines. Let think tanks write 30-page papers on attempted versus successful. Guinea-Bissau does not need clarification. It does not need labels. It does not need any semantic debates. The country saw the soldiers. They saw the transition. They saw the president leave. They saw the general sit on the seat. They know exactly what happened. And they, like Second Take, like to call things by their name. Next, we're talking Trump, Ramaphosa, and the G20 summit that apparently belongs to Donald Trump's living room. America has had many presidents, but only one who treats the G20 like his private WhatsApp group. And this week, Donald Trump logged in, scrolled past the global economy, skipped climate change, ignored diplomatic protocol, and went straight to the part where he kicks South Africa out of an organization he does not own. South Africa will not be receiving an invitation, he thundered, as if he'd caught Pretoria stealing lunch money from the White House kitchen. And with that, he attempted to uninvite an entire sovereign nation from a multilateral forum that operates without formal membership rules or the faintest obligation to listen to him. The only thing missing from his announcement was a signature in crayon. The US bureaucracy didn't comment, mostly because the G20 doesn't work like Mar-a-Lago. You can't just lean back on your golf cart and say, "You out," but Trump did anyway, declaring South Africa not worthy of membership anyway. Which is a bold position for a man whose foreign policy resume reads like a rejected script for The Apprentice, Nuclear Edition. And the reason? Pretoria refused to hand over the G20 presidency baton to a random US embassy official at the Johannesburg summit that Trump boycotted. South Africa held a formal handover ceremony at DIRCO headquarters, diplomatic, orderly, and witnessed, while Trump demanded something closer to a coronation. When he didn't get it, he did what he always does: invented a crisis, sprinkled in some conspiracies about white genocide, and posted it online before any adult in the room could intervene. South Africa, meanwhile, responded with the calm disappointment of a parent whose teenager has slammed the door for the 5th time this week. And of course, that parent is not African. Ramaphosa called the remarks regrettable, which is diplomatic code for "we refuse to wrestle with you on the internet." He reminded the world that America skipped the summit of its own accord and that US businesses, those who actually understand global markets, showed up anyway. Pretoria was not rattled. If anything, it was mildly annoyed that it had to explain basic multilateral procedures to Washington again. Vincent Magwenya, never one to miss an opportunity for strategic clarity, went a step further. If the US wants a tantrum state relationship, so be it. South Africa will simply move on, talk to the grown-ups, and attend via other channels if the host tries to ban them. Because the G20 isn't a country club. You can't revoke someone's membership because they didn't clap for you at your imaginary inauguration. Experts were quick to remind the world that Trump has about as much authority to kick out South Africa as he does to rename the Indian Ocean. The G20 is informal. It has no constitution, no expulsion clause, and no mechanism for uninviting anyone. If you show up, you're in. If the host doesn't like you, they must simply enjoy your presence the way families enjoy an uncle who overshares at Christmas lunch. Pretoria knows this. Washington knows this. The G20 knows this. The only person who doesn't is the man live tweeting his own international law from Florida. And South Africa? It has survived colonialism, sanctions, global recessions, and load shedding. A temperamental post on social media doesn't qualify as a geopolitical crisis. If anything, it confirms a long-standing truth. Some countries practice diplomacy, others practice performance. At the next summit, whether in Miami or another venue that isn't bankrupt from litigation, South Africa will be there. Seat at the table, nameplate on the desk, flag upright, because membership isn't granted by Trump's mood. It's grounded in economic reality. And the G20, unlike certain Twitter accounts, still operates in reality. Next, we're going to be talking about Namibia's election, where people voted, but it seems like democracy took a nap. We'll be back with Nam Perspective. Namibia's 2025 elections will be remembered less for winners and losers and more for the audacity of absence. Citizens, apparently inspired by collective existentialism or a desire for a very long Thursday nap, decided to skip the entire democratic exercise. Turnout projections hit historic lows, which is political shorthand for "we left the building and we let the parties do whatever they want." The ruling party is projected to dominate, but projections in this context feel more like a polite suggestion than a genuine reflection of citizen enthusiasm. Somewhere in Windhoek, someone might have voted, but but mostly the nation voted with its feet, straight out of polling stations and into whatever business, boredom, or existential contemplation awaited them. Election officials showed up, valiantly manning empty booths, counting the few who did remember, and practicing patience that borders on sainthood. Political parties declared projected victories, media outlets dutifully reported them, and analysts sighed deeply while trying to measure legitimacy in a vacuum. Ballot boxes filled slowly, campaign promises were recited to walls, political slogans echoed in empty corridors. It was less an election than a performance art piece, democracy in Namibian minimalism, featuring 1/3 of the electorate as performers and the rest of the country as a collective audience of ghosts. Urban centers were especially theatrical in their disengagement. In districts that once teemed with voters, polling stations resembled museums or abandoned cafes more than civic hubs. Some turnout projections hovered near a quarter of registered voters. One imagined citizens commuting, shopping, working, living their lives while whispering, "Voting? Oh, that's cute. Someone else can handle it." And yet, despite their absence, the machinery of democracy continued on, like a treadmill running while the user forgot to step on. Parties were projected to win, numbers were tabulated, and legitimacy became an abstract concept whispered about in editorials while nobody listened. Even opposition strongholds, where one might expect the drama of contested ballots, were transformed into barren stages. A few token votes were cast, a handful of scattered wins projected, and that was enough to remind analysts that technically democracy had occurred. But the real narrative was elsewhere, in the yawning emptiness of the electorate's disinterest. Citizens were not angry, rebellious, or even creatively subversive. They were simply absent. A subtle, scathing critique of a political process that seems to have failed to inspire. Democracy, it turns out, is not compelled. It must be seduced. And on this day, Namibia collectively hit the snooze button. Media coverage captured the tragedy comedy with breathtaking efficiency. Headlines reading like minimalist poetry: voters stay home, parties win anyway. Editorials decried low turnout as historic and embarrassing. But in doing so, they merely chronicled the obvious. One can almost picture the front pages snapping their fingers at a nation that ignored them. Yes, we exist. And yes, we are bored. The quiet of empty polling stations became the loudest statement of all. Engagement is optional. And if the people don't care, even the projected victories are hollow. Analysts and political commentators, ever polite, attempted to pass this vacuum. A victory in such circumstances is, projected, not earned. Numbers may be tabulated, charts may be made, and spin doctors may declare triumph. But legitimacy is harder to quantify when the electorate refuses to participate. Winning in an empty stadium is not quite the same as winning hearts. It is winning by default, a triumph marked not by enthusiasm, but by collective shrugging and the occasional eyebrow raise. Irony oozed from every corner. Ballot boxes collected dust, campaign rallies became rehearsals for ghost audiences. Party organizers projected dominance, but it was a hollow echo. Media projected victories as we do, yet the absence of voters mocked us all. Every announcement of a clear mandate was punctuated by silent, yawning void of citizen disengagement. Namibia had managed to stage an election that officially succeeded, while practically failing in the same breath. Rural constituencies contributed to the satire. Farmers, workers, and townspeople largely abstained, leaving election officials to manage polling stations like caretakers of museum of absenteeism. Some ballots were cast, some votes were counted, but the dominant mood was one of polite indifference. Even in areas that might have been competitive, citizens collectively said, "We trust you to do this," or not. "We're not fussing." And the parties, for all their projected wins, became actors in a play in which most of the audience had exited before intermission. The urban-rural divide, often a narrative in Namibian politics, seemed irrelevant. Both experienced dramatic absenteeism, though urban centers, with the additional energy of traffic and commerce, provided a more surreal contrast. Citizens moved through streets, shops, and offices, ignoring the very ritual designed to influence their lives. Voting for them became optional, a quaint idea rather than a civic imperative. And yet, we march on. Analysts compute what can be computed. Media reports what should be reported. Democracy, at least on paper, is functioning. The absurdity is Delicious though. Imagine a contest where the referee shows up, the scoreboard is updated, the players perform their roles, and the crowd is almost entirely absent. That was Namibia's 2025 regional council and local authority elections. The ruling party's projected dominance is indisputable, yet it rests on the foundation of non-participation. Opposition parties, minor or major, occupied a few scattered spaces, reminding everyone that technically choices existed. But for the vast majority of citizens, democracy was background noise, an optional jazz track in the life of a nation that clearly prefers silence. Satire writes itself in this context. Victories, historic lows in turnout, ghostly polling stations. It is a tableau of civic disengagement. Political parties will celebrate, media will cover, and analysts will nod, but the audience is elsewhere. It is the ultimate expression of democracy by default. Governance proceeds, but citizen approval remains abstract. Participation, the lifeblood of legitimacy, has fled. Namibia has proven that authority can exist, but consent may be absent, leaving the moral weight of victory suspended in irony. Looking forward, the implications are stark. The ruling party, projected to control local and regional governance, will govern a population that largely abstained. Budgets will be approved, policies will be enacted, councils will meet, and yet the civic energy necessary to legitimize these actions is largely absent. Authority will be exercised in a vacuum, with citizens observing from afar, a subtle critique hidden in the silence of empty booths. Winning is easy when no one participates. Legitimacy is far harder. The nation's shrug is both poignant and cutting. Namibia has demonstrated the power of absence, the eloquence of non-participation, and the limits of projection. Elections can proceed, numbers can be announced, but if citizens choose not to engage, the process becomes ceremonial. Democracy in this incarnation is a theatrical performance observed by ghosts, conducted by officials, and narrated by analysts who try in vain to quantify disengagement. Ultimately, Namibia's elections are less a contest of policies and candidates than a masterclass in irony and the quiet power of the electorate choosing not to participate. The ruling party is dominating. But in a country where showing up is optional, the moral and civic authority of that dominance is provisional. Ballots were cast, numbers were projected, media reported, citizens collectively shrugged, and in that shrug, the most eloquent message all emerged. Democracy exists only if people choose to acknowledge it. Namibia, it seems, has perfected a new form of political commentary, passive protest through absence. Authority is assumed, projects are implemented, projections are announced, and legitimacy is questioned silently, daily. The electorate has mastered the art of the political shrug, leaving projected victories to fill a void created by civic disengagement. And for those watching from the sidelines, it is both absurd and instructive. Democracy marches on, but only for those willing to show up. In the end, Namibia's elections will be remembered not for winners or losers, not for ballots or projections, but for absence. Democracy, it turns out, is optional. I sat down with Matthias Haufiku during Election Watch 2025, and we were talking about the electoral system and if it's still in a position to efficiently serve the people as we move into a new age.
One of the reasons why we see the numbers at the polls dropping over the years.
Yeah.
You can't keep on promising and not delivering and expect positive outcomes.
We were actually, there's an update right now, which is still up on Namibian Sun's X page. It's still on the Namibia Elections 2025 on Facebook, where there's a constituency where they arrived strictly for a protest vote. They did not go in to vote. I'm sure maybe someone might have trickled in later, but their statement was made. Their statement was, we have come here strictly to let you know we are not voting because nothing gets done. We would certainly not apathy. Without a doubt. That's a protest. And it's a tricky situation, without a doubt, because, I mean, obviously for them, if 10%, go in there, the rules are the rules, someone will be elected. But for some areas, it's gotten that bad, Matthias, that they are willing to go and brave the sun, to walk through all sorts of obstacles, simply to go and say, we're not happy with this.
Yeah. We must remember that elections are sort of the cornerstone of any democracy. And Namibians have, over the years, respected the democracy that we have. So when you push people to the edge, that's what you'll expect. So how do we address that going forward? Because when ECN puts the numbers up on the board, when they declare those results, they will not say, no, the results was perhaps low because there was a protest and so on.
No.
Yeah? It will just be the apathy song again. But then what is the root cause? That is what we must tackle. So, and I sometimes I wonder, because ECN is, since last year, introduced this sort of process where they have meetings with the political parties and they engage on these things. Perhaps those are some of the things to look at. There is political parties, ECN, it's fine. They are the poster child of the election.
Yes.
But then again, they can only do so much.
Definitely.
They can only do, they have their flaws, that much we know. But then again, there needs to be other areas that also needs to be factored in as we look for a solution to this. So it's really a tricky one, but it's unfortunate that we have people who were pushed to that level.
Yes.
I hope it's not a sinister move. I hope it's genuine.
Genuine,
If
yes.
it's genuine, it still
breaks your heart.
It breaks my heart, but it's also their right to
Yes.
sort of champion their democracy in a way that they see fit for them.
That was the conversation with Matthias. Yet another voice was notably very, very low, almost a whisper. And it was the voice of the youth, which is why I sat with Anna-Marie Dutoit to discuss youth participation in Namibia's regional council and local authority elections. You know, as you can see, the elders were clearly excited to be in the queues and exercising their democratic right. Do you think you can say the same for the youth?
Unfortunately not. I do think that I spoke to David from the ECN yesterday. He's the spokesperson there, and he said that they really tried with the youth and really tried. But I do think, and this is something that I can say about myself included, is that our youth kind of tends to take advantage of a vacation day. And I think that's something that we unfortunately saw today. We did find some youth, but not as much as I would have liked to see. I know even some of my friends that didn't go out and vote, and I do think that we were trying so hard because it's important that you as the youth make your voice heard. We are the generation of tomorrow. And unfortunately, the turnout for the youth just has been a bit disappointing.
Coups succeed, tantrums fail, and elections reveal the quiet power of apathy. Guinea-Bissau's generals run the country with predictable efficiency. South Africa's diplomacy holds firm against performative threats. Coups succeed, tantrums fail, and elections reveal the quiet power of apathy. Guinea-Bissau's generals run the country with predictable efficiency. South Africa's diplomacy holds firm against performative threats. Namibia's ruling party wins by default, highlighting the emptiness of a mandate earned while citizens stay home. Across the continent, the lessons are clear. Power is not always won through votes, obedience, or spectacle. It can also be claimed in absence, performance, and sheer audacity. I guess some second takes are easier than others. Good night.